I'm Larry Phillips. I'm the chairman of the Homeland Security and Public Safety Committee in the Texas House. We're here today to talk about an issue that the governor has set to be an emergency item this session. And the House is stepping up today and starting out and laying out what we're going to propose for the protection of our state. We've got a great group of bipartisan support here to talk about these issues. First, I want to say thank you to General Nichols and our Texas Military Forces, Colonel McCraw and the DPS forces that have been really working hard, always putting their life and a lot of times their family life on hold to protect us. And we're going to hear a little bit more about that as we go forward today. But with that, I'd like to welcome everybody here and turn it over to Chairman Bonnen, who has worked very hard through the interim to deal with many of these issues and present common sense solutions to help us to take care of our state. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Phillips. Good afternoon. Thank all of you for being here. I'm honored to be here with Chairwoman Symphronia Thompson and Representative Oscar Longoria and all of my colleagues in the Texas House. And we have two special guests I'll mention here in a moment. We're here today again, not by choice, but by necessity. Border security remains Washington's responsibility, but it is Texas that pays the price for their inaction. For many years, Texas has been proud to stand in the gap created by Washington. In fact, state funding for border security has more than tripled over the last 6 years. We've launched repeated surges with state and local law enforcement, all on our own dime. That price is paid by every Texas taxpayer in all of our communities. Texas is on the hook for even more, though. We spend more than $200 million biannually to incarcerate criminal aliens in state prisons. And our counties spend $137 million biannually to hold them in our local county jails. That, too, is a price paid by every Texan in every community. But we've stretched more than our financial resources to make up for Washington's failure. We've also put a heavy burden on state and local law enforcement, asking DPS troopers to travel from other parts of the state to help, leaving their own communities a little less secure. That is another price paid by every Texan in every community. Crime that comes through the border rarely stays at the border. It finds its way into communities across Texas and the rest of the nation, where human beings are exploited for profit and lives are ruined by drug addiction. Border crime is not just a border problem. It is a Texas problem, and it requires a statewide response. That's why today I'm filing House Bill 11, the Strong Border, Safer Texas Act, a bipartisan bill that will help law enforcement stop border-related crime wherever it occurs throughout our state of Texas. Rather than a one off again, on again effort to fill the gap created by the federal government failing to do their constitutional responsibility, we are here to create a consistent, permanent, and thought-out effort that all Texans can count on. First, this bill addresses the problem at its root by enhancing and strengthening the resources available to DPS troopers and local law enforcement, Texas game wardens along our border. Working in conjunction with our Appropriations Committee and Chairman Otto, we can put more state officers at the border so that we no longer have to redeploy personnel from other parts of the state, and that means every Texas community will be a little safer today. This bill will also create a DPS Officer Reserve Corps comprised of retired DPS commissioned officers who will assist with background investigations, sex offender compliance checks, other duties. And they will help law enforcement not only on the border, but they will do this across our great state. Under the Strong Border Safe Texas Act, those caught smuggling contraband into Texas will face tougher penalties. And those attempting to smuggle vehicles, guns, or money into Mexico will face southbound checkpoints within 200 yards of the border. This bill will ensure uniformity and transparency of crime data between law enforcement agencies at all levels of government through the adoption of the National Incident-Based Reporting System. And very importantly, it will create a new multi-agency crime information center in the Rio Grande Valley that will be operated 24/7 by local law enforcement with the assistance of DPS. The center will provide real-time crime information and analysis to support all levels of law enforcement, both along the border and throughout our great state. I'm very proud to have with us here today not just my colleagues in the House, but Hidalgo County Sheriff Eddie Guerra. Thank you for being here. And McAllen Police Chief Victor Rodriguez. Thank you for standing with us today. They have been our partners and have worked hand in hand with us here recently to make sure that the great leadership by collaborating together to solve the problems and challenges that we face as a state and statewide. This bill also cracks down on the tragedy of human smuggling, which is an issue that Representative Thompson has led on for many years, and she will discuss in greater detail with the bill she has filed. It also lists human smuggling as an offense under the statute that addresses organized crime activity. It stiffens penalties for those who compel people into prostitution. In a perfect world, or even a world where the federal government actually did its job, these measures wouldn't be necessary. But they are necessary because our border remains unsecure as long as that is the case. Texas must continue to stand in the gap. This bill is the result of many months and many hours of collaboration with state and local law enforcement, local elected officials, and my colleagues of both parties in the House and in the Senate. To speak about another aspect of our effort to make the border stronger and Texas safer, it's my honor to introduce and welcome Representative Oscar Longoria, who will be discussing a bill he's filed.
Thank you. I want to commend everybody for being out here today, especially Chief Victor Rodriguez and our Sheriff Eddie Guerra. As part of our effort to create a stronger border and a safer Texas, I have filed House Bill 12 to create a new border prosecution unit, which will help local prosecutors prosecute border-related crimes to its fullest extent. Modeled on the success of the Special Prosecutor Unit of the former Texas Youth Commission, now Texas Juvenile Department, the BPU will be an independent group that coordinates with and supports all local district attorneys along the border. The unit will help prosecutors screen cases, secure indictments, and bring accused criminals to trial. It will also provide technical and legal assistance to investigative personnel to help prosecutors and law enforcement coordinate more effectively on cases that stretch across multiple jurisdictions. Specifically, the BPU will not target only drug crimes, but also crimes that often are associated with drug cartels, such as murder, kidnapping, extortion, money laundering, and human trafficking. HB 12 is an important part to create a stronger Texas and safer Texas. Apprehensions alone do little to keep Texas safe, because when you release violent criminals, they go back and commit those crimes again. HB 12 makes sure our prosecutors have the resources and support they need to make sure that those who enslave, exploit, and endanger our fellow humans are being put behind bars where they belong. Thank you, and I'd like to extend my esteemed colleague, Chairman Thompson, to explain a little bit about her bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm filing House Bill 10. I filed House Bill 10, which is an anti-human trafficking omnibus bill for this session. This is a comprehensive piece of legislation that is aimed at addressing all of the aspects of the anti-trafficking efforts. All of you know, and I'm sure you're familiar with the fact that Texas has a very extensive highway system, Interstate 35 and Interstate 10. And these two corridors are the unique pieces of transportation that are utilized to facilitate human trafficking within the state of Texas. In an effort to create a statewide partnership between law enforcement agencies, social service providers, non-governmental organizations, and legal representatives and state agencies who are fighting at the forefront, we're filing this particular piece of legislation, this particular session, that has grown out of our task force. The task force, as you know, was organized within the state of Texas in 2009, and it has worked to develop recommendations to assist us in the prevention and the prosecution of human trafficking. These recommendations, we know, that would lead to a successful legislative change that would better protect both the adults and the child victims. From the border to the panhandle, we know that we need to ensure that those who are at the front lines combating trafficking are able to work quickly and efficiently, and more importantly, we need to ensure that the victims of the crimes are properly taken care of. This bill encompasses 10 recommendations. It extends the criminal statute of limitation of compelling prostitution of minors to bring it in line with the human trafficking statute. It provides exceptions for the victims of human trafficking under the Crime Victim Compensation Act. It adds human trafficking training to the list of required training for members of our judiciary, and it creates a child sex trafficking prevention unit within the Criminal Justice Division under the Office of the Governor to assist these agencies in coordinating resources for child sex trafficking prevention. This unit will also provide a more comprehensive and coordinated response to addressing the entire continuum of trafficking to ensure that all of our state borders are protected. Each session, we as legislators work to make sure that our state is safe. I believe that this bill is a major step in the right direction to properly coordinate efforts at all levels of government across the state to ensure that Texas is safer, stronger, and a more secure place for everyone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, we'd be glad to answer any questions if there are any.
Chairman Bond,
Yes, sir.
what is the price tag for your measure?
Price tag for my measure is incredibly low because we don't get in the lane of the Appropriations Committee. The Appropriations Committee will decide how many troopers they want to put additionally into the DPS force across the state.
Talk about
Yes,
crime
sir.
costs from human trafficking and from activity along the border. Do you have any kind of numbers for here in Central Texas?
We don't have the Central Texas numbers, no. I mean, I'm sure someone does, but we aren't focused on Central Texas. We're not focused on the border. We're just focused on the entire state of Texas.
Chairman, you said that when the officers are on the border, they're of course leaving the communities that they left a little less safe. It takes, Marty, correct me on this, but how long to train 200 officers, something like that?
About 18 months.
Yeah, so in the meantime, 18 months, 2 years, how long is it okay for those other communities to be less safe?
Well, the reality of it is that's a loaded question. I appreciate the way you presented it. But the answer to that is that, quite frankly, a lot of those troopers are back in their home community, and because one of the things that this bill does is that it allows, and DPS is presently doing this, in the border region, it allows them to go to 5 work days at 10 hours a day, and that multiplies the number of troopers by not adding more troopers. They've also, through the Speaker's leadership and the LBB's leadership, there are presently deploying over 4,000 cameras onto the border, which also reduces that necessity. So the reality of it is it's a process. And what we're here doing today is we're stopping the fits and stops. We're stopping the surge and stop, the surge and stop. We're creating a long-term plan that Texans can count on. And it will take some time to get more troopers trained and on the border, but we are confident we can do that sooner rather than later.
Mr. Chairman, there's no target number of troopers that this bill wants to provide to the borders, and that's going to be worked out by appropriations.
That is the responsibility of the Appropriations Committee. I don't have the privilege through this legislation to name that number. I believe the Appropriations Committee is going to address that very soon.
But the intent overall is to get enough of a presence there so we don't need a future surge.
That's exactly right.
Chairman, on the southbound inspections, would those be for immigration checks as well, or is it for contraband going south?
That's a word we don't use around here. This is simply about securing our border. We don't get into the issue of immigration.
So this wouldn't be a rider?
This is to make sure that stolen vehicles and drugs and humans are not brought back across into Mexico without us doing our job to slow that down.
Would the hope be that the federal government reimburse the state for some of this?
We certainly do. We sent them a bill at the end of last year, and I'm not underwater holding my breath, but we hope that they will. I'm proud that Chairman Dan Flynn has filed a bill in the House this session to request reimbursement from the federal government, and so has Senator Estes.
Chairman Bond, you said several times that Washington hasn't done its job to secure the border.
That's correct.
Tony Payan at Rice University says that the federal government's doubled its spending, doubled the personnel on the border over the last 10 years. And the fact that apprehensions are down shows that the border is as secure as it's ever been. Is that wrong?
I would disagree with it, and the reality of it is that when you see apprehensions going down, where those started going down is when we had a surge of DPS on the border. You see that number continue to hold at a low number because you're seeing great cooperation and teamwork between our local jurisdictions like we have in Hidalgo County and McAllen. They're doing a great job filling that gap, working with our DPS, and so I think I would disagree with that rather fervently.
Chairman, on this, back to the spending aspect, there's language in there that any person who encourages encourages or induces somebody to remain in the country unlawfully. Would that extend to like DACA immigration clinics that are going on the border right now? There's a lot of dreamers that get advice from immigration attorneys. They say, wait and see what happens with immigration reform. I guess in a sense, those people could be encouraged to stay.
That is not what the point of this bill is.
So they wouldn't extend to immigration?
No, sir.
To what extent does your plan, if at all, incorporate keeping National Guard troops at the border?
It doesn't actually incorporate that in any way. The reality of it is, I would argue our bill will get the National Guard off the border sooner. The sooner we can get the National Guard back home to their families and their jobs, the better we'll be. They are presently on the longest deployment in the history of the National Guard or State Guard, or the National Guard, and it's our responsibility to pass these measures for the Appropriations Committee to get more DPS troopers hired and out there so that we can bring the Guard back home where they belong.
DPS has sent out a press release, or whatever you want to call it, to hire troopers away from local departments. In fact, our border lawman, and I'd like to hear from you on this too, is the concern that what they're going to do is staff up by depleting local departments along the border.
Well, that's another, you two guys shouldn't be sitting together. That's another good question. I think DPS is making an effort to hire anybody who is willing and interested in being a trooper. I don't believe that they are targeting any specific community or department. But with that said, I'll allow the gentleman to speak, but my experience in visiting the border is that what they would like to see is folks from their community that maybe have law enforcement experience from their local agencies. They're who make the best troopers. If y'all want to speak to that, you're welcome to.
I agree.
I know. Next time. Any other questions?
How will the South Texas Border Crime Center differ from the Fusion Center?
Well, this will be a cooperative center led by local law enforcement, led by these two gentlemen here behind me, the McAllen Chief and the Hidalgo County Sheriff, and the partnership of DPS, and it will also incorporate all of the local law enforcement jurisdictions that want to support the effort. Thank you all very much. Appreciate your time and attention to this issue and being here with us today. Thank you all.
Thank you.